you've been punching for a while or have been interested in trying punch needle for a while, you probably have noticed that there are a ton of different punch needles to choose from. And it can be really confusing as you're getting started because you may not know which needle to use and what fabric to combine it with, plus the yarn. What do the numbers mean? What are they talking about when they say pile or loop length? What does all of that mean? So in this module, we're going to go over the most fundamental part of punch needle, which is the actual tool itself. And I've got a variety here on my table, so let's take a closer look. All right, this is by no means all the punch needles that there are. These are just a few that I've collected that I want to go over and kind of note the similarities and the differences between these. So you'll notice right off the bat that these two are a lot smaller than the rest of these. These all have much larger needles, and this is a laver needle. I love using this for something like embroidery floss, and it's also adjustable. So on all of these, the length of the needle shaft is what is going to determine the length of the loop on the back of your work, which is traditionally the front side. Loop side of your work, traditionally the front side. The length of this needle here is what's going to determine that. So a laver needle allows you to unscrew that little screw and you can move the needle, make it long, make it short, and you can adjust the length of the yarn. So this would be something smaller than needle. You're using much smaller yarn. This would be used for a smaller project. Embroidery floss. This is not my favorite needle though for embroidery floss. My favorite needle for embroidery floss is actually this one right here. And it's the Ultra Punch. And you will notice that this one also has a variety of loop lengths. But instead of having to kind of manually figure out how long you want to make the needle, this one has little numbers on the side so I can control it by twisting and moving that pin. Again, this one has adjustable loop lengths, and it also has an adjustable, I can put, when I take this out, I can actually change this out and make this needle bigger. So this could accommodate anywhere from 3 strands of embroidery floss to like a finger sock weight knitting yarn if I put in the biggest, needle into that little slot. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility, but again, you're going to be using this on a smaller project. Would not want to punch an entire rug with this needle right here. Unless maybe you do, I don't know. You do you. All right, this is another basic needle. I don't believe, let's see. Look, this one also allows you to change the length of the shaft. But again, it's just a basic plastic needle. Here's the needle that comes in my kits, which I call my basic needle. It's got the wooden handle, the metal shaft. You cannot change the length of this needle. And then we get on to the needles that I like using most. So this is also a laver needle, but the difference between this one and this one you'll see is that this is a lot bigger. This needle is comparable to an Oxford needle, and we'll talk about the Oxford needles in a minute. It's comparable to an Oxford fine. This also comes in a little bit wider shaft, which is comparable to an Oxford regular. But what's cool about this needle is that you twist it clockwise and it will grow. You can feel it kind of click into place. And this has about 7 different loop lengths or pile heights. Sometimes you have to kind of move it to click it, that you can use. Obviously, this is much longer than the longest Oxford needle. And then if you want to shorten it, it can go really short. So this is a great needle. The main difference between this and the Oxford, 2 main differences. Number 1, Oxford needles are not adjustable. So if I want different loop lengths, I have to buy different needles. But the other main difference is the way they are threaded. And this is why, if you've heard the term Oxford needle as being a really great needle to use for punch needle, this is why. you can thread this needle through this slot without having to use a threader. So the only way for me to get yarn through this needle is to use either a wire or PVC threader that comes with it. This needle, super easy to thread. The downside is if I want different pile heights, if I like a textured look, I have to buy more needles. So you have to kind of weigh, what are you wanting to do with your project? And that will kind of help determine what needle you're going to use. Now this is also an Oxford needle, but you'll notice this one is thinner. So Oxford comes in two different sizes, regular, or two different widths rather. Regular, which accommodates thick rug wool, chunky, bulky yarn. If you're using acrylic, something like a wool ease, that's what this would accommodate. And then the fine needle is going to accommodate a worsted or a fine rug wool, something a lot thinner. So these are the two different width options. And then there's different length options, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then this fancy tool, you can find something similar to this. This one is actually, I got at an antique store. This is like a tufting gun. So it works the same way as a punch needle. It threads a little differently because obviously the yarn is unable to run all the way through the shaft. But you put it on your fabric and kind of walk it like this, and it punches for you. It's very fun to use, but I have found that I actually really prefer punching with one of these three needles. For this course, we are going to focus on Oxford needles because it is what I recommend most. It's the best needle you can buy. As you can see, I've tried a lot of different needles, so we're going to focus on what makes Oxford needles unique and what kind of yarn to use with them. So in this next section, let's talk about the different loop lengths and what those numbers mean.